say the same thing. Well, hey, when it comes to veteran suicide, that we'd rather have you alive and struggle than have you die, and then we always take the wire with you. So in this podcast, episode 13, it's veterans and families who lost a veteran to suicide. Hi, I'm your host, Tony Williams from Veterans Council Veterans. And we got along a couple with some of our tribe, and our tribe belongs to Lakedra Houston. How you doing, Lakedra?
Hello, how are you? I'm good.
Don Gigante and his fellow mate, Caleb Scott. How you guys doing?
We're doing good. How are you?
Now, one thing that makes me real nervous is that I have actually 3 Marines, as you'll notice as time goes on, 3 Marines on one broadcast. God, please, let me get through this without getting any trouble, getting censored by Facebook. So for right now, I want the tribe to talk. And one of the things I wanted to mention, and Carol is part of the tribe, but in this case here, she's going to be on the side of the panelists. So John, Caleb, Carol, and I, we found out about a Navy veteran that died by suicide on the 25th of May, which in itself is probably a sign of something when he did it that day. And what we did was we dispatched almost like a Marine task force. I'd like to say Army task force since I'm kind of outnumbered with the Marines. We'll say Marine task force. And we dispatched a Marine task out there. We call it an engagement team. An engagement team consists of a survivor and then the peer who support them. In this case, it was me, Caleb, and John. We went out there and to talk to the family, engage the family, and let them know there's help out there. And I'll tell you, it was an interesting moment. I would like, and I know, unfortunately, Lakeisha, you weren't out there for that particular episode because you're all the way in San Antonio. But I want to bring you in as well. But I want John and Caleb to talk about what went through their minds when they went to this funeral of a fellow veteran dying by suicide on the 25th of May.
So Giovanni was a corpsman for, I'm not sure what unit he was served with them. He was their corpsman, and like they were all together, and it's like when you go and you hear the stories, it's the same thing that would be like to go to a funeral of someone you know, and they're gonna go out.
It's a very humbling experience. Like what he's saying, you get to look into what you would be doing if it was your friend's funeral. So you get to see everybody react kind of the same way. You know, these guys are in a lot of pain. These guys are hurting, and we're just there as a support. Like, hey, if you guys need anything, we'll let you guys do what you guys want to do, and we'll back off of it. But the humbling experience is just seeing these guys. I think maybe it's a Marine thing. I don't really know, but these guys are going to go out. They're going to have a couple of beers, and they're going to share those stories. And they were already talking about the stories of, they're corpsmen.
Yeah. Once we saw them, we could tell right away who it was, who served with him, and the difference between how they were together. They just stayed in their group, and the family, they didn't even want to stay inside.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell that they're going through a lot of pain, and it's humbling, but it's also a little trippy at the same time to just go through it and see it. But it feels good to be out there and trying to assist them. I mean, Carol talked to their family because she's the mom. We're not going to be able to do that. The only thing we can do is hey, you like crayons? Cool. So do I. And then go from there. So
that's one thing I loved about Carol, because if you're a military veteran, especially a long time, you really don't have the greatest communication skills when it comes to the families. So Carol, can you real quickly explain to us kind of what you went through when you went there to approach the family?
Well, I think in some ways it's like reliving the experience that I went through, except seeing it through a different lens where I'm not dealing with it directly, but I'm observing it. And it's so difficult. His mother was just overtaken with grief about his suicide. And his half-brother was there, and his father also had flown in for it. And it's just such a difficult time, and I like the concept of what we're doing because I do think that it provides some degree of comfort for our response team to go and say, hey, we've all been there through this. You'll get through it. Just, hang in there. It's a rough ride, like I told his mom. It's a rough ride, but you can get through this.
I think, and Lakedra, on an active duty side, I know you're out there in Texas as well. Have you been and this is called suicide postvention. I'm not sure how many people out there have even heard of the word suicide postvention. But Lakija, when you were out there and you heard about some suicides out there, did you have any relationship with anybody who may have died? One of the family members or the military who may have experienced somebody dying by suicide?
Yes, actually, one of the guys, but he was active duty at the time. One of the guys I was stationed with, we were cops, and he committed suicide on the gate. And I had to go out there and assist, and it was kind of hard because it was my friend that I had to assist, and seeing him commit suicide or seeing it the after effect really messed us up. But the same thing, we heard about TAPS and those different resources, but the same thing with the mother, she was done. It was our time as the organization to make sure we take care of them. So we pulled them in and we just held them tight. And you don't hear about the support a lot outside of, being active duty. I don't hear about it a lot. I just know when it happens in your unit, we do certain things, but it's not really talked about that much. But it's very important when it does happen to a person's unit that we actually go out there and we take care of them.
Wow. So that's something. And I don't want to get too much of it now because next week we're going to have a podcast focusing more on the suicide from the active duty side. And Lakija will be one of the key guest speakers. She'll be one of the co-hosts in that event. So we won't go too much in that so we can give you guys a little teaser for next week's thing. But thank you again for your insight, Lakija.
No problem.
So now, after we got finished talking a little bit, now we wanted to introduce some of the people that have experience and know Joe Rasor. Because really this is about Joe Rasor and Carol's son, and also Joe worked for Jeff. So what we have here, we have Carol Rasor, who's also a VCV tribe member, and but was at the same time as a mother. She unfortunately experienced her son dying by suicide. And we also have Jeff Selinsky, who's a sergeant. But before we get to Jeff, I want to get to Carol, and Carol kind of lay the groundwork on what you experienced once you were notified that Joe died by suicide.
Right. Tony, if you don't mind, I'd like to address something up front, especially for our listeners, especially for the mothers or the spouses or the children, because I think it always runs through your head, what could I have done to prevent this? I fell short. And I'm a professor at St. Pete College. I'm also a retired captain from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. I was on the hostage negotiation team for 15 years. So I'm telling you this because I've had a lot of training experience and I couldn't stop it. And that's just something I'm gonna have to live with for the rest of my life. So our viewers out there, don't put the blame on you. It's a decision made by the person, and you will go over and over in your mind again, what I could have done different. Joe went to Indian Rocks Christian School his entire life, from preschool through 12th grade. And when he was in the 12th grade, that's all he wanted to be, as a Marine. I want to join the Marines right after high school. And we had done the Florida prepaid, and I wanted him to go to college first, but that was his love. So he joined the Marines. He did deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he also went back as a contractor to Afghanistan. I noticed every time he was deployed, he'd come back, and he was a little different, but I kind of expected that with being in the military and with the experiences he had. But he came back, he finished his college degree, he started graduate school at USF, and then he decided to go out to Oregon and start a business. I got the call at 3 in the morning. I had the sheriff's office, who I had worked for, knock on the door, and at the time said to my husband, "Hey, Leo, is Carol here?" And he says, "Yeah." And I knew, I've delivered death notifications for 25 years, and I knew that was not the tone, said everything. And I just turned to him, I said, "Is it Joe or is it Aaron? Tell me which one." And they said, "It's Joe." And I knew it was either an accident or something bad. And they had told me he committed suicide. So I was on a plane the next morning at 11 o'clock out to Oregon. And it's just so much that occurs because I met with the sheriff's office because I want to make sure it was a suicide and nothing else. Talked to the medical examiner's office, arranged to have his body flown back here to Pinellas County. And at the same time, he had a 92-pound Shepherd lab mix that I had to work and getting back on the plane. So it was a lot going on in a short period of time. I had to have his stuff moved out of the house he was renting and had it shuttled back here. At the same time, he had a warehouse out there. I had to get an attorney because he didn't have a will. And that was an experience in itself, because I hired an attorney firm, and after working with them a little bit, I said to them, well, how much is this whole process going to cost? Because they always bill you by hours. And they said, well, probably around $25,000, which I almost fell off the chair. So I found another attorney out there that had a sympathetic heart to veterans, and he only charged me $1,500 for it. So I tell you that because you got to be real careful, because you're at a critical time. Your emotions are high. You just got to get things done. So flew him back here, and I had called in Iraq and asked him to do his funeral, which they graciously agreed to do. And I can tell you, a friend of mine who also lost her son, KIA, over in Afghanistan, said to me, Carol, it's going to be like putting a wedding together within 3 days. And that's exactly what it was like, nonstop, trying to get things organized. And you don't go through something like this. So I'm thinking, maybe 20 people will show up. Well, maybe 250 people wound up showing up, and I was just stunned. Most of them I didn't even know. But what I wanted to share with you that really was alarming to me is when we went to Bushnell and they did, the rifle salute, and that afterwards I had 2 Marines at different times while I was there come up to me in full uniform, gave me a hug and said, I want you to know how much Joe meant to me. He talked me out of suicide. And both of them said that at different times. Then another one who was also out of the Marines, his mother knew that he was struggling and knew Joe. And he said the same thing. If it wasn't for Joe helping me, I don't know what I would have done. And when he graduated from college, he put his hat at Joe's cemetery site and sent me a picture saying, Joe was always on my back about education, and I wouldn't have been here if it weren't for him. But what I can tell you, my son was out of the Marines then, so no one comes to your rescue. Not like if you're in the military service where you're going to have a casualty officer. You're staying by yourself. I know there's other organizations out there, but I think the difference I see with VCV, like what we did going to the funerals, is reaching out at the time when they're in crisis. There's organizations out there like TAPS, but no one ever contacted me from them, not at all. So you're just standing by yourself through the process, and it's a tough ride. There is one thing I'd like to reach out to our veterans out there that are watching this to know this. I know that my son must have been under tremendous pain, probably from the trauma of some of the things he saw. And I know that from being a law enforcement officer, what post-traumatic stress feels like, without a doubt, after 25 years. But that solved his pain. But I can tell you the pain transfers to the family members and to the friends. It's just in a little bit different form and to different extents of the pain. But every moment of the day, I think about Joe. And if I could change the outcome, it would have been so much better. But that's not how life is. You got to work with what's given to you. And I just want to thank the tribe for their support, because this is a great group of people. They're so experienced, so kind, so knowledgeable, and they care about making a difference. So thank you, Tony, for letting me share my story about Joe.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for thank you for what you've been doing for Veterans Council and Veterans as well, and I appreciate it. And now I want to go to Jeff Zielinski. Jeff, of course, Gunny Sergeant out of Marines, and Joe worked for him, and so he can give us the insight of how it affected him as somebody that worked underneath him as far as the Marines as well. And also, I want to also let you know that Jeff has created a nonprofit called FOB Razor, in recognition to Joe and how important he is too. I'll let Joe talk a little bit about that as well, but I want to make sure I bring Joe back on where we can have a more extensive, detailed conversation about what his nonprofit's all about as well. But Jeff, tell us, give us some insight again about what you saw as Joe when you were in the Marines.
Yes, sir. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of this, Mrs. Rasor. Always a pleasure, ma'am. Joe was my right-hand man. Him and I, we went to Iraq together, and we went to Afghanistan together. There's certain people you meet in your unit and you instantly click. Maybe it was because we're both from the same hometown, Largo, Seminole, Florida. Maybe it's because we were sun-baked on the same beaches. I don't know, but instantaneous brotherhood. Instantaneously, he became my right-hand man. I watched young Corporal Rasor turn into a salty, very savvy Sergeant Rasor right before my eyes as we built up to go to Iraq. And when I was fortunate enough on Christmas Eve to leave Iraq and take a small team to Afghanistan for another, back-to-back deployment, he was the first person on my list when they said, Gunny, pick a team. And it was the first guy I went to was my right-hand man. There was no doubt in my mind that anything that I was going to go through, anything that was going to happen, all I had to do to look to my right shoulder, and he was right alongside me every single time. And it was vice versa. There was nothing that I wouldn't ever do for my brother. When Joe got out of the Marine Corps, he went and did the contract thing, and I went ahead and retired. But, a lot of times with Marines, we're not real good about keeping in contact and keeping, checking on our buddies as much as we should be and whatnot. But again, it was a little different with me and my little brother, Joe. We did stay in contact. We did talk to each other all the time. We did check in with one another and just laugh and joke and find out what kind of nonsense trouble we were getting into in our different parts of the country. I never knew that my little brother was suffering so bad. And I can honestly say, as a man who was probably about 1.5 pounds of trigger pull away from ending my own life at one point, miraculously 6 months before he did, that I know the pain that he probably was going through. I know the confusion that he was probably going through. I felt those things. I've made the plans. I had the same thought process that I would be doing everybody a favor if. My story ended a little different than Joe's. But I'm here to tell you today that I've learned that the pain that I would have inflicted, or the taking of my life would have inflicted so much more pain on the people that I love and that love me. If I would have actually gone through with my suicide attempt, I would have never, ever, ever again had the opportunity to improve. Which today I know, 4 years after my contemplation of suicide, and almost 4 years after, my having to go to rehab and get help, I know there is room for improvement. And I know that at that bottom, at that point in your life, he probably didn't see an opportunity or a chance for it to go up or to get better. And I one of my biggest regrets today is that I didn't get an opportunity to tell him what I've learned along the way since he's been gone. As somebody who lost their buddy, their brother in arms, not a day goes by that I don't think about what happened? What happened out there that I could have said, called timeout and said, hey, is this something that's going to bother him? Is this something that is going to take him to the next level once, up the road sometime in the future? There's not a day goes by that I don't think about what was it that we went through? What part of our past contributed to what happened on that day? I can also say that my experience based on events, after I retired is that this suicide thing, for the warrior who thinks that he's doing everybody a favor, that he thinks that he's ending the pain for himself and it's not going to affect anybody else. Joe was a guy, like I said, that, and his mom's testified to the fact that so many people knew that Joe had his back and was going to be there. And man, if there was a fight to get into, he was going to be along your side with you, because that's the type of Marine he was. Joe never wanted anybody. He never wanted to lose anybody, a Marine above him or below him. He wasn't willing to do it. And, the day that Joe was buried, our operations officer, a guy that we worked directly for, took his life. On the same day that Mrs. Rasor was burying Joe, our operations officer from that deployment took his life. You see, this suicide thing, it's sort of like the guy who falls out of the hike. They see a guy fall out of the hike and they get in the truck, and everybody else who's on that hike and is hurt and thinks, oh, that guy doesn't have to feel the pain anymore because he's in the truck. That's what I feel like, that this suicide is contagious to that point. It's to the point where it gets to the point where they see other people had found a way to do it, and they looked up to that person so much that if they did it, then why, maybe I can too. I tell our veterans all the time here in Houston that I talk to, and my buddies, that, we need the vet to stick around, to tell the story, to tell everybody what we went through. And it can get better, and it will get better. But making that final decision to, eliminate a not so permanent problem is something that we just need. That we need these guys to understand that there's a way to get away from it. Pardon me if I feel like I'm babbling a little bit.
That's
great. Real hard thing to talk about.
This is definitely a tough conversation, but it's a needed conversation. That's not being publicized, because they don't know, like you're just saying, how much hurt they cause that person they think they're trying to save from the pain. They actually cause them more pain.
Jeff,
I appreciate your candor. I want to get some of the tribes in here to have any questions. So, John, you got any questions for Carol or?
Yes, I actually have a question for Jeff. So with the contagion factor, you said the operations, was it more than one person? Like, has it grown from that? Like, how many people from the unit are still here today? Like,
I understand the question, and the question was it just Joe and then the OPSO, and was it just an isolated incident? And the answer is no, it definitely wasn't. That unit that we deployed with has lost, since I've retired, they've lost, I believe, 8 men from suicide. 8 men that don't get to, bring flowers to mom on Mother's Day. They're not buying kids for birthday prizes, and they're not taking their brides out to dinner on their anniversary. This is definitely something that is, like I said, it's contagious. And, we all look out for, and we're not willing to leave anybody behind, and we're always going to fight for our brothers. So that's why we need these vets to stick around. We need them to stick around. We need them to help somebody else. I hope that answers your question.
yes, thank you. And like, has anyone from like the unit tried to reach any of the people still in it, or is it just the veterans talking to the veterans?
As far as I know, a lot of the men that are still in that are out of that unit or that was on that deployment. There's a lot of, cliques and buddies that still talk to one another. I know that I still got a group of guys that I'm somewhat close to. Luckily, I've had a couple of them reach out to me when they were thinking about making that grave decision. But, my personal opinion is that whatever we're doing to reach out to our brothers and sisters in the warrior community, we need to definitely do more of it.
Yeah,
Carol,
yeah.
Carol, and I have a question for you. I know you said that, and I feel the same way, that it continues, it transfers the pain. I know that we don't really have that many programs like TAPS. Is there something that you, as a mother that dealt with this, is there something that you would want to see more of? Like what programs should, are there other programs, or what should be some improvements that we have to help the next, family members that deal with what you went through?
Right. Well, I think what's difficult, not so much in my case because I was retired and then I had a full-time job, but financially to bury Joe was $16,500. That's a lot of money for other people that wouldn't be able to afford that. And so when they're disconnected from the military, that their family has to pay for the burial. No one comes to help. Now they do supply the headstone at Bushnell, but that's it. So for me, that was less of a problem, but to me, that's a real problem for families to go through. And I'd like to see something put in place to help these families, not only through the process itself, because I've never been through anything like that. I'm pretty good at organizing and planning things, but this one was over my head. And just to have some support to walk the families through, as well as in cases of need, that there's some finances for the family. I know that has to be carefully screened, but there should be some backup for families.
Okay, Caleb, you have a question?
So Jeff, well, actually, Carol, we love you. Thank you so much for your story. To Joe, until Valhalla. So Jeff, you have an organization, a nonprofit?
Yeah, absolutely. My fiance, myself, and another member of our board of directors, we started Former Razor. Check it out at fobrazor.org. FOB, for those of y'all who aren't familiar, it's a forward operating base, taking, deployment lingo and calling the place that this community that we're building, we're calling it Forward Operating Base Razor. About 18 months ago, I asked Mrs. Razor if it would be okay if we're able to start a nonprofit, if we could name it after her son, my brother, and she said that she absolutely would appreciate that, and so we did. And Former Razor is about veterans sitting kneecap to kneecap with veterans for the purpose of destroying this enemy threat that is this suicide within the warrior community. As somebody who was on the business end of a firearm and thinking about taking myself out one time, like I said, I have a somewhat of an understanding of what men and women are going through. And because I was able to sit kneecap to kneecap with a veteran, a Korean War veteran, he fought at the Chosin Reservoir, that he walked me through a new way of life. He showed me how to deal with these issues that I was dealing with these feelings that I was feeling, and with this disparity that I honestly felt that there was no getting out of. He showed me how to walk myself out of that, and he held my hand and walked me out of it. And that's what we're trying to do at Former Razor. We're trying to build a community of warriors who can come together, and through teamwork, through buddy checks, through camaraderie, we can walk each other through and out of this hell that we feel like we're in. We encourage buddy checks. We encourage We all remember that misery builds camaraderie, and so does commonality builds camaraderie. And I've seen doctors for my PTSD. I've talked to doctors about my suicidal ideology, and that's all good and well. But I hit a new level of understanding and a new level of healing when I sat kneecap to kneecap with another veteran, when we worked on me together. And we realized that some of the problems and issues that I have, they're out of my control. I can't control everything, but I can control how I react to them. And that's what we're trying to teach people at Fob Razor. We're trying to show them that there is an alternative, because like I said, we need these veterans to understand that we need them to tell the story. And, if for the veteran who's thinking about, making that final decision, for a vet to think like I thought, that by taking myself out, I was going to end all these problems and end all this hurt for all these other people. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people right now that are online. And the topic is, what do we do about it? How do we make it better for the family? Because the family hurts so damn bad. We're sitting here today and we're talking about a Marine who spent 3.5 years in a combat zone, a couple of different combat zones with a guy. And because of that, him and his family have devoted every bit of free time they can possibly have to try to help other people from not doing that ever again. We're sitting here today with a mom who lost her son, her baby boy. She lost her baby boy. And she's devoted every free second that she has today to console mothers who have gone through the same pain that she went through. The reason why people are doing these things is because the pain is still there for us. We're still carrying the burden. So for the veteran who's thinking about committing suicide, you're not taking any pain away from us. I would have never taken any pain away from my daughter or my son. I would have just added to the pain. And instead, because I got lucky, because of people who cared for me and people that loved me, instead what I got an opportunity to do was to show my children today that I was at my worst and tell them about how bad it was and show them how I walked out of that hell. That's what we as Marines, we as soldiers, we as airmen and sailors, and even coasties, that's why we joined the military, because we have that in our DNA. We just need to keep pushing. Sorry, I talk a lot, but
no, you're really good. I'm inspired. I don't have a nonprofit or anything like that. I work for Mr. Williams. So the only thing I do is captivate veterans in the St. Petersburg, Seminole Largo community, and just use dark humor to push through the hard times. So you sharing your story and what your nonprofit's doing is just I'm extremely humbled by what you guys are doing and how close that you keep in contact with the mother still and all that. I mean, I'm baffled and blown away right now. And I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I mean, I'm inspired to do something similar. So thank you guys.
One of the things I want to push, and I think LaKeja has something to say, is suicide post-vention is not going away as long as veteran counts veterans here. You may not want to hear it, you may not want to see it, but we're going to talk about it because it has to be talked about. It's hard. Trust me. We all know, right? John, Caleb, everybody been part of that. Know it's hard as hell, but we got to do it if we want to save another veteran's life. So it's not going to stop with us. Anybody, LaKeja, you want to say something?
Yeah. I think, Jeff basically read my mind. I think he's like next door to me because he basically said everything I wanted to say. But that's the same thing I'm telling everybody, as me as also a person who wanted to commit suicide and had a failed attempt. We have to look out for each other. It's not a time to be embarrassed of what you've been through. We go through it, but we definitely, veterans who are suicidal, don't keep quiet. Talk to somebody, reach out to somebody. And those veterans who have been there, do not be ashamed to go and reach out to other people. Another thing I also see is, as both of y'all mentioned, we talk about signs so much. Everybody's like, what can I have done? Sometimes there are no signs. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. So you guys have to remember that. Do not take it to heart if you didn't find those signs. Now it happened. Let's go ahead and try to help those other people. But I'm happy to have met both of y'all. I think you guys are courageous. Hey, you gained a daughter, Carol, so I'll be at your house soon.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you. And do you guys, as we wind down, you guys, Carol, Jeff, want to say something before we wrap it up, and then we'll have a quick takeaway from the tribe when we finish up.
I would just like to reiterate again and try to drive the point home to any veteran out there that think about taking their lives. Like all the panelists have said, you may think that you're a burden to others. You're not. It's the burden when you commit the suicide that's difficult to work through, and there's really no escaping from this hell that the family winds up living in. I love my son to death, and I really believe in my heart he's in heaven. But if I make it there, the first thing I'm going to do is just probably slap him across the face and give him the biggest hug I can for putting me through this hell.
Yeah, good ahead. Jeff?
Thanks for the opportunity to say one more thing. Is I'd like to say to the one thing that I wish I could have done different in my case is I didn't seek help. I knew I had an issue with PTSD. I knew I had an issue with nightmares. I knew I had an issue, just like I knew I had an issue as an alcoholic. I knew I had these problems. And I waited until it was 4th and goal. I waited until I hit my absolute bottom. And when it comes to suicide ideology, your bottom, your end result, there's no coming back from that most of the time. So what I would encourage, and what I encourage people to do here, that I encourage to come to Former Rasor is, let's not wait until it gets that bad. We know when we have some issues going on. We know when nightmares are eating us up. We know when we're not treating the people we love the way we should treat the people we love. We know when we're getting a little aggressive and a little hot under the collar for things that just aren't that big a deal. That's why I encourage people, even when you're well, come to the FOB, come behind friendly lines. Let's get together as a unit and attack this thing together. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made was never putting it together that, 21 years in the Marine Corps infantry, not one time did I train by myself. Not one single time in 21 years did they ever say, hey, Gunny, hey, Sergeant, hey, Corporal, or whatever rank I was, grab your pack because you're deploying all by yourself. I never one single time, not one time in 21 years, went to war all alone. But I tried to fight this fight of suicide ideology, this idea, in my case, of alcoholism, and in my case of PTSD. I tried to fight all of that by myself. It didn't work out. I don't know of anybody that can say that they're going to get through it on their own. But I do know for a fact that there is a record of people who come together and work together on a common goal. There's a hell of a lot of better chance of doing it that way than there is fighting on your own. You're not alone. Let's get some help, and let's not put our families through this. There is a way to get better. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you very much. And as we get close to our ending, I want to get a chance for the tribe to give any one of their takeaways they may have experienced in this podcast.
A lot. I mean, I think I'm going to join the FOB. I'm on my way there, right? I mean, you inspired a lot of us, Jeff, and that's sometimes that we need to hear that. We need to hear people who have went through that. So my takeaway now is to make sure that I do my best to help those and just don't talk about it. Make sure I'm actually doing it. So now it's more of a really pushing myself more to go out there and help those. So yeah, you brought a lot of light to the situation, both of you, Jeff and Carol. So thank you guys.
I just want to say that with all this difficulty our society is experiencing and being kind of torn apart, is that veterans' lives do matter. And I think that we have to push that emphasis on that to make a difference and to protect our veterans. They've served for us. Now it's time for us to serve and be there for them.
And the twins?
I think you're not going to know. If you don't know the signs, you're not going to see the signs, even if you're not going to be with them all the time. So you're not going to see the signs. But I don't know if you want to say this, but Jeff, you said I think you said 6 months before Joe, you went through your own problems. Did you tell Joe?
Actually, you know what? I didn't tell him the whole shoot and shebang of it. Great question. I never thought about this, but I did call him and I said, "Hey, bro, I'm going to be offline for a little while because I got to get some help. I'm about to die." And he said, he loved me and he told me he would be here when I got back. But to answer you, I didn't tell a lot of people, but I did tell him that I was going to get help because I told him I came real close to dying, and if I don't get help, I will die.
Glad you got help.
Yeah, and I appreciate everybody out here. I'm still trying to understand how all the Marines have a beard. I don't understand that part there. I don't know if it's a fad or whatever, but anyway, I appreciate everybody who took the time out to talk about something I think that needs to be talked about more when it comes to postvention, and to give the resource to the families and the veterans out there. And I hope we continue this on again as far as we have this conversation. We're not going to go away. Thank you again, Jeff, for all you're doing with your nonprofit FOB Rasor. Thank you again, Carol, as usual, being a loyal tribe member. Thank you, Lakeisha, for being here as well at the last minute, but I'm glad that you're here. And the twins, thanks for you guys showing up as well for this. My final notes on this is that, as I mentioned earlier, that veterans suicide, the postvention is very rarely mentioned because it's almost like it's an admittance of failure. And no one wants to admit that they failed. And that's not just from the families and the friends and stuff, but the military as well. So you don't hear much about it. It's very stigmatized. And the only way we're going to sit there and decrease some of the stigmatizations, we got to start continuing to talk about it. And we need to look at postvention as being also part of prevention and not something by itself. Because as Jeff just mentioned, the rest of you guys out there, ladies mentioned, by them knowing how it's going to affect the families and it's going to carry the pain, that by itself is a preventive measure. And one of the common things we had together with Jeff and his nonprofit, and of course, Veterans Council and Veterans, is that we're veterans. We're also, if we're not part of the solution, how do we expect others to be part of the solution? This is our fight and it's personal. When the cameras are gone and the money's dried up, guess what? If you're a veteran, you're still going to be there. And that's why it's important that we have to be involved. We have to be part of the solution. So I agree. Again, postvention has to be talked about. What I want to talk real quick about is that next week, we're going to talk about the suicide and the active duty side. We're going to talk about it from the training, the intervention, and the postvention side as well. And we'll have two great guests out there with both active duty. Again, Lakeisha Houston will be back again. She'll be out on the Air Force side. And then Tom Cruise from Belgium, come out of Belgium. He's coming from the active duty side as well. We're going to talk about some of the things that we've seen and some of the things that we think that are good and are not good, starting next week as well. Okay, guys, it's another great episode. Hope we see you guys again next week as we talked about the active duty side. And the following week, if you're following us, we're going to be talking about the psychology and transitioning. There's also a psychology piece to transition. We're going to talk that with Dr. Carlos Garcia. And after the week after that, for military sexual trauma episode, we're going to have a benefits. We're going to talk about the benefits that you have to go through when it comes to military sexual trauma, as well as far as what do you have to go through. That we have an expert, a benefit expert, Dwayne Kimball, be on to sit there and answer some of the questions, and we can go through some of that well. And toward the end, toward PTSD, we're going to introduce equine therapy, be hosted by one of my guys, Norm Bissell. And finally, we're going to have a guest spotlight. A guest spotlight this month will be Camaraderie Foundations. So stay tuned as we keep pushing forward. And this is Tony Williams from Veterans Council and Veterans, out. Thanks, guys. You're a little late.
Recording, but
You're a little late about recording. Thank you, but
you told me I had to.
I'm glad you did. But I would have. Oh man, I said, oh man. I told those guys, somebody remind me about the record. I always forget about it. You know, I get so caught up in the.
All right, I watched The Conjure. Just fucking literally tried to hold in a laugh as soon as you pressed it.
It was so bad. Caleb, you're horrible, man. You're horrible.
I'm glad he didn't shout. He just texted there and says, "Record, record." I was like, oh.
There's not a lot of times, an enlisted guy can tell a major to do something. So,
that's okay.
captivate
Well,
on that.
I listened. I obeyed. Let's look at something, doing something again, all of us together. Next month, I want to try to get people to start building relationships, and they'll start getting, they'll start getting comfortable seeing the same people on, whatever. Let's look at something like that in the coming months as we go on and stuff. You guys are available, whatever. I appreciate it. So, I'm in here. I'm here. My son has like 3 dogs. The granddaughters are here. They're all coming through here. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I had to put the mic on mute. but it's all good. We're doing well. So anything before we take off? Anybody have any questions, comments before we get out of here?
Yeah. For the FOB, are you guys thinking about going, are you just comprised just in Texas, or do you have other chapters in different states?
Oh, we are in our infancy. We, as a matter of fact, we opened up right when COVID was shutting everything down. So no, we're right now just in Houston. But our goal is one day for this to be something that, or something like it at least, is the goal is for this to be a little contagious itself. I know it'll work because it worked for me, and I'm definitely not anybody special. So if it worked for me, it'll work for others.
No, yeah. I mean, I use dark humor. I mean, it's the reason why John and I get along so well is that all we do is just joke around with each other that civilians don't know. I mean, we're a little bit more perverse because we're Marines and stuff like that, but it's a familiar feeling. It's that camaraderie, sitting down together and just having a beer, or not have a beer, whatever your preference is, but just put a joke like that and not somebody get offended.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
That's
what we're trying to build at Bob Razor.
Yeah, if you do a St. Pete Tampa chapter, man, I'm all about it. I would love to just come in and just hang out.
Traitor!
I am allowed to whore myself out to other people.
He's like a free agent traitor.
He can wear more than one patch on his biker jacket, man.
Come on.
I just let in Keith and Don. They were the two attendees from the
okay.
So I don't know what. Hey, Keith and Don, if you want to say something hi before we shut off.
Hey, this is Keith. Just wanted to say thanks for everybody talking today. I learned a lot, and I appreciate you guys doing this.
Thanks, Keith. You're a psychologist?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, psychologist in Tampa. Okay, great. Maybe we'll have a thing on the psychologists or something.
Whatever.
The PhDs.
Yeah, that'll be well attended.
Hey, Don, you going to say something real quick, Don?
She said Carol is awesome. I saw that in the chat.
Okay.
The tribe is awesome.
Yeah, well,
But Jeff, I'm in Dallas, so I'm in Waco area by Dallas, so I come to Houston all the time.
Check me out, man. FobRazor.org. My phone number's on there. I'm available 24/7.
Look at all these traitors. Oh, my God.
He's in Texas.
Hey, do it right in front of me, too. You could have waited till I stuck off.
But he's in Texas. He's in Texas. I have nobody here.
You're right.
Carol and Jeff are going to be fixing each other afterwards.
No fidelity amongst you guys. Okay. Okay,
right.
guys. Great. Have a great week. I'll be seeing hopefully Lakedra and Tom sometime this week so we can start getting our things together as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.